We have her, but be warned, she's been through a lot. She's not quite normal. Of course, she's kinda like a mummy, right? And you see why with the initial setup too. So if you're squeamish, this movie is not for you, but it's a movie that I thought really dialed up the tension excellent. There's some hints of, like, if you're a mother or a father, you got a kid, you don't want strangers around them, but yet you'll do anything to make their lives kind of happy. You see that at the very beginning with another pet in the household that kind of sets the tone of what's going on. To me, it's set up for a sequel if they wanted to do it. The ending might be a little, but overall, I thought it was enjoyable. And so after I watched it recently, I started looking at some of the reviews for it. And I guess everybody kind of shit on it, saying it's too violent, it's too gory, it's too squeamish. I'm like, no, it makes you uncomfortable because when you see this young girl, you're reminded of the first movie that probably did this really well, The Exorcist from back in the day. It's that level of disgusting where it's just very effective. Just physically looking at this girl that's alive, you're like, man, this is just awful. It's got some nods to like classic mummy stuff there, like with the scarab beetle and other things too. And the way they use it's very disgusting. And when I say disgusting, I mean that in a positive way. A movie that you can watch visually with low special effects that can affect you, there's a skill to that. And so this reminds me of, like, say, The Evil Dead back in here before. Hey, Rose, Princess is in there. I was talking, I guess we had a technical thing going on here. Can you hear me too, Rose? Okay. I hear myself, and I know you guys are in chat. I see me being active on the mic. I'm flying solo tonight, going over some selections. Just started with Lee Cronin's The Mummy from April. To me, it's a good watch, worth watching if you like that sort of thing. I do. The one I wanted to start talking about after that was one I'm recently watching on Apple TV called Widow's Bay. Widow's Bay is a weekly drop. I think they're on episode 9 coming up this week. I think there's 10 episodes in the season 1. Do not know if there will be a season 2. Great. I'm glad you guys can hear me. Awesome. It's been a while since I've flown solo, so I probably screwed something up. No worries. I can always edit the video. Yeah, so Widow's Bay. To me, this is an interesting show because I always go back to Stephen King here in the United States as being one of the best people that's able to write, and stories, especially his short stories, are as better than his long form. He's really great at having what I call a story behind a story, where you can have a small town, there can be a history behind it, there can be people that are attached to this history, and there's always adult things that go on to it where people aren't perfect and all that. And King, as an alcoholic himself and a drug addict at one point in his career himself, he has that humanistic sort of slant to it where he's not a perfect individual, and he puts that in his characters. You usually have an alcoholic, you usually have somebody on drugs, you usually have somebody that doesn't have a lot of money, you usually have a rich somebody, you usually have an eccentric. And if you've ever been around small towns growing up, especially in New England where Stephen King's from, you can feel that still kind of exists. Now we kind of think that it doesn't, but Widow's Bay is one where this guy is the mayor of an island who's recently widowed, and he has a teenage son. And like most small towns, there you don't have a big growth rate. Things are decaying. He's trying to bring in tourist money for the summer season, a la like, Amityville, for example, where he's trying to get like a cutting edge coffee place in there where they serve espresso and all that with machines, where most of the townspeople are just fishermen and don't make a lot of money, so they don't mind the regular stuff. But what they do differently here is it's more of a thriller than I would say horror, even though it could be presented as horror elements, where the town has history of bad things happening, unexplained fog storms coming in. That reminds you of The Fog, like with John Carpenter. Maybe there's a monster in the water that reminds you of something else. Maybe there's a revenant on there. Maybe there was some witchcraft back in the day. Maybe there was torture. But what's interesting about it is they treat this thriller more of a suspense where, like the lady that works with them, I think she's phenomenal. They have some great dialogue back and forth because this mayor's kind of a wuss, but he's really not, and you find out why. And so it turns out all these bad things might be true, but nobody in present time believes them. They think it's just hokey stuff. So it's kind of interesting, not only being a weekly drop and visually quite stunning too, quite kind of like The Mummy, where you see what he has to go through negotiating what's like being the mayor of a small town. He has to entertain in the first few episodes, a food critic, because if he makes a great impression, this guy might write something and it might drive tourist dollars there. So he's trying to appease him and do all that. So it's fun. It's a fun summer thing watching him negotiate what happens there, and there's some interesting things that happen to it, and I'm enjoying it. I like it a lot. Widow's Bay is not too bad. I agree with you, Princess. RDV, Rose, let me say this to you guys here. I said at the beginning, he's taking a much deserved break here tonight. It is his birthday, so congratulations to RDV. He does a lot of work backstage. He's been trying his hand at doing a lot of the producing stuff, so I've let him take the reins on that a bit. I do appreciate his work there too. He's done a lot of organizing and some thumbnail stuff. And so I always try to let people run with what they want to try to do and see how it goes here, because the history of the Extreme Movie Show started off one way, became something else. And thanks to RDV and Professor Pixel, the young 20 something, helping out, we've kind of continued it on. And now that we're getting more people showing up, enjoying the chat, it's something that we're trying different things out to see what works and what sticks for us too, to have fun with it. So happy birthday to you, RDV. Thanks for the work. We'll see you on Tuesday night when you're back, when we're continuing the Man with No Name trilogy, the second one. Yeah, so I think that one's pretty good. So that's the Widow's Bay. That's the Mummy. Now I'm going to go on to something a little different. This one I'm watching right now, and much like Widow's Bay, it's a lot of fun and it's different. It's the one on Netflix, and despite Netflix pushing out a lot of crap and volume of stuff, which is their business model, sometimes it works for me. This show is working, and it's called The Burrows. Alfred Molina is an engineer who ends up in a retirement facility. So some people are calling it Stranger Things for old people. It kind of dumbs down the idea of it, but you get it. And it kind of makes sense because you do have perhaps an alien type presence on here. But here's the thing that differentiates, say, an older cast in The Burrows versus Stranger Things. We all are a child at heart, and I think sometimes when we're in tune with that, you can see that in older people when they get together. The chemistry with the actors in here is absolutely phenomenal. It's a great aesthetic. It's set in the Midwest. I think it was shot in like Santa Fe, Albuquerque, New Mexico area. So it reminds me of just this kind of quaint 1950s vibe a little bit. But what's interesting is the way The Burrows sets up. It's not the mystery. It's when you have a show with all the actors, I think, are over 70 years old, except for one who might be in his mid 60s. That's cool to me. Instead of just having an actor, you have this woman that starts off, and I want to describe the scene because this is not something you could do in Stranger Things or in your typical teen coming of age things or your young adult sort of stuff, midlife stuff. It's only for older people. And this is where I think it adds a little value to it if you can appreciate it. And that's this. We see this modest desert home on a cul-de-sac. We see this an attractive older lady in her 70s. She looks like she's getting ready for bed, except for she's going to the bathroom and she's putting on her lipstick. She's making herself look good. Nobody's in the place with her. Okay, maybe she's going out for a late night drink or something. Maybe she's a date. She's getting together with friends. And one of the things too is I like a lot of less talking in movies and more showing, or in television shows, so you can form your own opinion. For me personally, I don't like very talky ones. What happens here, she goes and she sits back on her couch. She starts up her phone. Oh, so she's going to talk to somebody. Okay, maybe she's got a senior dating app, let's say, right? Well, an old man gets on the phone, and it turns out it's her husband. Because while she's in the Burrows retirement facility, so is her husband, because he's in the memory care portion of it. And that's kind of sad, because if you had any experience with memory care or those facilities, things happen, and I don't want to make too big of a deal out of it, but it sets up the tone and just kind of touches you in a way where you're going, I get it. You're just looking for the human connection, and you're trying to do your best for this person that's no longer becoming the person you knew and have lived with your entire adult life, that you've been married, had kids with, and started a family, whatever the case may be. So it was a little sad, but it was done right. So the guys, spouting off stuff about, they're listening through the walls. There's a monster in the light, and all these kinds of things or whatever. And of course, it's the ramblings of a lunatic and all that. And they put him down, and she goes to bed. And then we see her, and I don't remember if she has she's sleeping, and the shot is looking straight down at her, like say from the ceiling fan, because there's one above her. Then she opens her eyes, and the shot then turns into looking up at the ceiling fan, and we see a pair of glowing eyes drop down on her face, and she's dead. So I like the setup there, because that says a lot of what's going on. You've got memory care, you've got the ramblings of somebody who is senile, you've got an old lady that's now passed. Well, what happens when somebody dies? It opens up your real estate. You go through probate, go through the will, whatever it is. Now, Alfred Molina, who I think is an excellent actor, he now is seen arguing with his adult daughter and her husband because they want to put him in care, and he's recently deceased. So now he ends up in that house on the cul-de-sac. So what happens? Bill Pullman, who's a great actor, shows up there at that night with some beer, starts talking to him about it and all that. And older people have a tendency to kind of shit or get off the pot really quick and form bonds a bit quicker because there's not much time left in front of you. So what happens is this whole group on the cul-de-sac end up bonding together because an unfortunate event happens to one of them. And while there's a doctor, Gina Davis is in it. She plays like, I think, like an art therapy instructor. She does like yoga and Pilates. You have an African American couple that have an open relationship, and that is significant in terms of what's happening in the story and how they live their life up to this point. Otherwise, you might go, oh, it's just modern woke nonsense. It's not for what they're doing. The guy smokes a lot of pot, spends a lot of time out in the desert by himself during the day. That's pertinent to the story. And of course, the place has been around for about 100 years. Again, important to the story. And so you see the advertising on television. They have the Alexa type device in there, that can, that are in places like that, which adds to a layer of the paranoia. So there's the element of not only just Stranger Things to it, but if you're involved into anything like, say, um, Wayward Pines was something we covered a couple seasons of here on the Extreme Movie Show. The books are out there, where it turns out this guy's frozen, doesn't realize it, comes back in the same town, but now it's been 2 or 3,000 years in the future, creatures have taken over. That's the whole Wayward Pines shtick to it. It's like, wait a minute, what's going on? It's echoes of The Prisoner or anything that has a paranoia thing with the town to it. So there's an element of that here in the Burrows, but what it really stands out to me, the chemistry of all these older actors together. I think it's tremendous. Normally, you might get one or two, like I think Mobland's got Pierce Brosnan, and he's in his 70s. He's got some other actors in it too. You see it in Yellowstone a little bit with some older guys. Of course, if you're watch Shrinking on Apple TV as well, you've got Harrison Ford in his 80s. He's in there. But usually it's one or two actors or actresses. Here, most of the group is literally over 7 years old as an actor, and that's the character they portray. So I've been enjoying this on Netflix, The Burrows. I think they're through 8 or 9 episodes. They've got 1 or 2 more to go. Do not know if it will be put in for like a second season, if it's been renewed yet, much like Widow's Bay, don't know. But I would definitely watch both of them. I think they've been enjoyable. Last thing I'll say about The Burrows, besides I think it's a very entertaining watch. It's not necessarily disgusting. You could be younger and watch it, not be turned off. There's not a lot of violence into it. I just wish they made the town a little bit more of a character, like I feel like Widow's Base does, but that's a personal nitpick of mine. That's something I enjoy. I like it when that's tied to somebody too, but it's definitely a fun watch. I'm savoring each episode. It's, again, once in a while, Netflix, just by sheer volume, puts out something I think entertaining and watchful to it. Want to go on to real quickly mention something that's to me sort of related to, the Mummy, and that's He-Man, because that's not something I plan on watching, because I look at the guy that plays him, I look at all the money he spent on it. From my understanding, it's bombing miserably. Don't know anybody that's actually seen it. I know there's a lot of advertising for it, and I don't know. I mean, the guy looks very pretty. He's got a sort of a big build, and I just go, spend a couple $100 million on something like this, you're not going to make your money back. Why? You're better off if you made 10 Mummies, 10 Widow's Bays, 10 Burrows, spend your money wisely, but that's not what companies do anymore. And so, unfortunately, with He-Man, I know that's something that a lot of people, or at least if you listen to the advertising, say it's going to be popular, much like Supergirl or whatever it is. I look at that and go, it looks horrible to me. And I'm not in the comic books on any of that kind of stuff, but I wanted to mention that because I know we have a lot of people like Mike from Comic Books Corner that likes that sort of stuff. Of course, RDV does, and to some extent, Professor Pixel. So to me, I have zero interest in those. A lot of them seem to be doing well, but we'll see about Supergirl. Now, 2 movies that I have not seen, but they're on my short list. I always wanted to see Obsession, because who doesn't like, stalkers or people that go crazy and going overboard. If I recall, it's made by a YouTuber that hasn't made movies. And regardless of that, my understanding is super low budget, and it's raking in the dough. And I guess a guy gets a girlfriend, ends up being kind of crazy, goes to the nth degree on it. Don't really know what's going to happen. Don't know, don't care, but I do plan on watching it because I've seen 1 or 2 clips and I go, okay, it looks at least technically well done, if not good enough. It's interesting enough. I'm curious as to what a younger person's going to do to make this woman seem crazy, and how she fits in. I wonder if they'll do classic stuff that we've seen, or if it goes violent like some other stuff. You had Michael Douglas in one there too. With Glenn Close playing the crazy psychotic woman where she boils the family's rabbit because they have an affair, but they get it on and they're fucking pretty good in an elevator. And then in the 90s, you have one that's kind of dumbed down called The Crush, which I thought was kind of funny in sort of way. You had The Work Wife that's like a Hallmark one. It's got Serena Vincent in it, who plays like the perfect secretary to a dopey dude. She's like the one that like does all her sports, does everything fine. All she wants to do is sleep with him. It's completely implausible. But these movies exist. So Obsession seems to be pretty hot. I'm curious to see how that's going to go. That's on my short list, but not nearly as short on my list as the one that I know people personally like. Again, Mike from Comic Corner and other people that have told me you've got to go see Back Rooms. Back Rooms to me, I think it was based off of a video game, and I don't know if that was based off of anime or something. I don't know who really cares. But I've mentioned on a few selections over the years some smaller niche stuff like Archive 81 that kind of hit a chord with me. I went, man, that's pretty good. Archive 81 was one where a lady gets hired to restore some VHS tapes that a rich old person does, but she has to go on site to the guy's mansion to do it because you don't want air contamination, all that. So he supplies her with everything. So she goes to this mansion every day into a certain like clean room so she can take these tapes that are decaying so she can clean them up, much like an artist would. If you're, say, reinvigorating an old painting like you would do at the Louvre or any museum, there's a methodology to it. This young woman's doing recovery, but of course, in doing so, she gets to see some of the material that's on it. And let's just say it's not pleasant. And he never did a season two, but it was like a psychological thriller. You kind of like vibed into it. From what I'm understanding is people are telling me the Backrooms is really kind of twisted and you get into it. I don't know, but I got it queued up. I'll probably be seeing it here in the next few days or week or so. But again, when you have a movie like Obsessions that comes out, it gets good word of mouth. And you go, hey, this is this kind of movie. Then what happens is other people start talking about it. You're more inclined to go, let me check out something like Backrooms. Oh, it's kind of like this, except for it doesn't have, say, Crazy Woman in it, but it's very trippy. So once you start getting a few hits under your belts, positive movie experiences, I think it just leads you to wanting to take a chance on seeing other movies. I don't know if that's the modern viewing audience today because I rarely go. There's very few movies that make me want to go out to a theater. Now people are going, well, I've got to see this because it's the big He-Man or it's the big Supergirl, it's this, it's that, or whatever. But for me, the fact that a couple horror or thrillers came out now, I think says a lot because typically most movies say in January of a year, calendar year, got dumped because it was a throwaway and you might catch a weekend or two when maybe things didn't go. It was like leftover time. But with The Invisible Man redone and some other horror movies, now there's like a reset. Hey, we expect now to drop a horror movie in January because that is work. It's been sufficient. And if horror movies, when they start doing well, they're cheap to make, cheap to produce. Bloomhouse, A24, they have a stranglehold on that model. You're not going to have some great ones, but you have some ones that are solid enough where you appreciate, like, say, the quality of the kills or something at it. So, like the Backrooms, again, low budget. I'll check and see if it's doing gangbusters, but I spent some time in Nashville in the past week, small bohemian type town. I was there on some personal business, and it was cold out a little bit. It was breezy. I was doing some walk around, and everywhere I went, picking up food, talking to people, I'd ask them all the same thing. Hey, the one theater in town is showing Backrooms. What do you think of it? And they're all like, "Oh man, this movie's great. It's a trip." And it doesn't matter if they're on drugs or on something. I don't really care. They were just like, "Oh," and I'm like, "Well, what's it like?" And they're like, "Man, I don't know what it's like. It's just really out there, dude. You got to go see it." Even the ladies at the co-ops were telling me all this stuff. So Backrooms got some text today. Rob, go check out Backrooms. It's incredible. You're gonna love it. I'm not gonna tell you anything about it. When people do that and they know me, I go, "That's awesome. Can't wait to see that." So again, there's a lot of things coming out, but there's a few that are based off of things I've watched before and what I look forward to that I go, I know I'm going to watch them. So I've got a couple of them here that are left there that are just some selections I picked out. If you guys have any here in chat, I'll definitely take a look at and add some insight to it or some thought about it, and you may have some as well. There's one for me that I really liked a couple years ago called Silo. Silo, again, if you think of a nuclear silo here in the United States, usually in the Midwest, upper part of the United States, of course, on both sides of the coast there. America's got great oceans on both sides. It's natural defense. So when we went nuclear in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and became a nuclear power and the world's number one when it comes to that, you would have these nuclear silos that would house them. And so people don't really talk too much about them. There was talks about nuclear winters. You started seeing that pumping up in the science fiction in a culture, I'd say in the 60s, overpopulation, other types of things that became ways to talk about movies. Godzilla is based off the nuclear threat of America from the Japanese perspective, doom and gloom, if you like that sort of thing. But Silo is interesting because as Rebecca Ferguson, as a lady that's like, she works on the low level of it. So if you look at it structurally, a silo, the low level people that keep it running live on the bottom. The high level people in government live near the top. And it's all about a closed system where they have their own air, water, and food because they can't go out, allegedly, because of nuclear devastation. And okay, they don't get into the politics of it too much, but there are obviously politics when you have power structures in there. And I've always been intrigued by Rebecca Ferguson ever since I saw her in Mission Impossible. And so she ends up kind of figuring out some conspiracies and stuff, and it turns out she has, I guess, a lover, for lack of a better term. Let's call him a boyfriend. We see at some point where they tried sneaking out, and the whole thing is whether or not somebody actually leaves at the end of season one and goes out to that. Because what's interesting is they have this giant cafeteria dining area that has pictures of the devastation outside, but how do you know? Especially if you haven't been outside. Is it propaganda that the man, meaning the government structure, the power structure, is feeding me to keep everybody in line? How much of that is really needed? Because maybe that is true. So it's kind of like a mystery thing, and it's very intriguing because it's kind of like, who's listening to me? Who's watching me? The way the silo is set up when you see her walking up and down stairs talking to people and stuff, it was very slow paced. Some people don't like it. I enjoyed it. I'm getting ready to watch season 2. Season 3 is dropping, I think, in July. So Silo, I think that's Apple as well. More credit to you if it is. Silo, I definitely think is worth a watch. It's not what I would call an action movie at all. When I was looking at some stuff there too, I came across one thing really quick that I saw the trailer and I was intrigued by it. I think trailers give away too much these days, and if they stopped at one particular point, I think it would have been more effective at driving up interest. And that's a movie coming out, I don't know if it's in August, called The End of Oak Street. Now, those of you that are horror fans like myself know that if you've listened to some of our older streams, especially around Halloween, we were trying to do a bit more, whether it's Hammer horror films, whether it's Italian was a Gaio films, or however you pronounce it, weird stuff. I like exploring that. I think one of the best horror movies in the past 10, 15 years is It Follows. Very Carpenter-esque, very 80s-esque, great soundtrack, great vibe, great play on sexually transmitted diseases, if you will, in a sense. It can be a little convoluted with the ending and how it's resolved or whatever, but that being said, I think it's fantastic. No budget movie, it's just, there's a nice tone to it to me. That is a good horror movie. And End of Oak Street, I believe, is by the same dude. So I'm really excited because I don't know if this is second film, third. I really don't know. He hasn't done too many. But what it's interesting to me is on Oak Street, there's a couple, and they're driving around or like that, and it seems like it's an ordinary neighborhood. And then you get to a point where I think the lady says to the husband, I think our street has moved. Like, what the fuck do you mean by that? Silo was Apple Princess? Yeah, I thought so. So yeah, that was definitely a couple years ago because it's almost like every year a show doesn't come out, right? It's like almost every other year, even if it's only 8 episodes. It has to do with contractual obligations, I'm sure, on the actor's part. I get it, and that writers too as well. So it is what it is, right? But Silo's one that was just a nice summer vibe. Sometimes in summer I like something like just relax. It doesn't have to be action oriented. You can vibe into it. And I like these different things too. Yeah, It Follows. If you like it, you say it's amazing. I agree with you. So I did see the teaser trailer for End of Oak Street. And the one thing I thought they did a bit too much of is where I guess for whatever reason why they say it, you see literally like the end of like an intersection where their neighborhood would be at. And it looks like it's chopped off and it's like literally elevated or something. Like it looked like somehow you've grabbed this neighborhood street, literally plucked it, moved it, and dropped it in the middle of a forest or something. I can't quite explain it because it's a real quick scene. I think that was a bit much to give away. And my wife has watched the show. I don't know if it's called Them or something like that or whatever. It's got one of the guys from The Walking Dead on it, one of the African American actors or something. And I don't know if it's similar to that where there's like some sort of mechanical barrier that you can't get past or whatever. So I went, damn it, they gave it away a little bit. But just the idea of our neighborhood has moved and you don't show it, to me, that's more intriguing, making you think about it. So your brain fills in the possibility. So when you go on to walk it, you're waiting for that, right? You don't give away the finish. Okay. How you get there doesn't matter. You can do it a lot of different ways because that's what extends the time, but don't give away the ending. You know, that's that kind of sucks. That's why I don't like trailers today. But I like the premise of it. And I always told myself if I ever saw anything from It Follows from this guy, I always wanted to see a second film because I was really enamored by the first one. It goes, much the same way of like there was one called Talk to Me a couple years ago by some Australian guys, I think, two dudes, I think, low budget, and it's the one that has like a hand that gets passed around at a party, and if you hold it longer than 90 seconds, bad things happen. But while you're holding it, like you supposedly go into a trance and you can talk to dead people. Sounds kind of stupid, but the fact it's done like at a college party, people drinking and smoking, and maybe something just happens was done well. And they did one recently called Bring Her Back, which is very similar and done very well. So anything they do, and I don't know who they are, I'd have to look them up, I'm gonna watch. So I was really enamored by that. And this stream tonight was reminiscent of Bring Her Back because I went to go do a stream on that and something connected or didn't connect to audio. So I spoke for a half hour and it didn't even resolve. And that happened here again tonight. So that's something I have to look at. But yeah, it's been interesting with the fall and the summer because normally week to week, oh, this is interesting. This is interesting. Now it's like, okay, there's going to be yet another Marvel, yet another DC, yet another this, that, yet another whatever. And I don't really care. But one thing that's been different this year for me is starting, like I said, with The Mummy in April. I've found a couple that have been pretty interesting. I have a close group of friends, and I have a bunch of superficial people that I interject with on a daily basis, business wise. And so sometimes that comes up with movies, and we talk. And I'm around a lot of kids and children, and they talk. So I'm always interested in hearing what's the next big thing, what's supposed to be the biggest thing coming out. Um, I don't know if people talk about that much anymore, and that's why we do what we do here on the Extreme Movie Show. Because me being the '80s guy, teenager, RDV being the '90s, and Pixel being the aughts, it's an interesting 2 to 3 generations perspective on movies that we've covered from the '30s to now. And I wanted to go over a few of them because I actually enjoyed a lot the Burrows. I'm really enjoying Widow's Bay. It's okay. I'm not saying they're great or they're perfect, but the volume of stuff that gets produced today isn't necessarily at a high content. I'm enjoying doing Miami Vice that we normally do here on Sunday nights. We're in the middle of season 1, getting towards the end. Just watch next week's episode, Smuggler's Blues with Glenn Fry. It's a great episode. Check that out. Friday nights, we sometimes have done stuff off and on. We may go back to it when we add to that. Tuesday nights, typically we do an action film. We're doing a Man with No Name trilogy, so we're doing the second one this Tuesday night. Check that out. And then Wednesday nights, I'm doing Forever Night, the TV show with Professor Pixel, who likes a bit of camp. We've talked about maybe doing Millennium or X-Files or something else once we get done with that. So next year, we can go into the next season of Columbo, and then next summer, go do Forever Night because superfan Kevin Dobson, his Facebook group, a lot of his friends and associates there have been showing up. So I appreciate all that. And of course, Princess and Rose show up. I think it's really good. The one thing I'll ask for those of you in chat is if you've got anything that you've been watching, you think's worth a mention, plugging it, put it here in chat. We can talk about it for a minute before we call it for the night. But I'm curious as to what you guys have been listening to myself. So I'll just mention one or two other things as we get going. Typically in the fall, when football season comes up, we might do occasionally football, Redskins things too. I have a love-hate with that. So that's usually a different stream. I always go back and forth. Sometimes I do it for a week or two and stop. So it's tough because it's different than doing movies, but it has been popular, and don't know if that's going to go. But we always talk about doing more during the months of October, typically, sometimes September, when it comes to horror, because I think it's a great time to visit some old ones, revisit some, do some trilogies. One of the things I know staying at the place I did in downtown Asheville was a giant television set in the room, and it overlooks downtown. And what they did is they had special channels you could watch. And the channels weren't like Hulu or Apple or Netflix. It was, hey, we have the Leprechaun channel. What do you mean by that? Well, all the Leprechaun movies in the franchise played back to back to back, all 8, 9, 10 of them. So after like a day, it would start over with Leprechaun 1 and go on and on. They did it with the Rifleman with Chuck Connors and some other ones too. So I thought that was kind of interesting how content gets pushed out. Of course, if you're staying in a Airbnb or a hotel or whatever like that, those things happen. So it's interesting because those things, those channels don't exist if there's not data that says, hey, there's a little bit of legs to this when you have a franchise. And Leprechaun certainly isn't the greatest franchise by all means, but sometimes it's better than the stuff that comes out here too. So yeah, Princess is saying here in chat, only thing is watches Widow's Bay. That actor was in one recently with Claire Danes and something, and I forget what it was, where he played like a really assertive personality in New York, and she was the lesbian book writer that lived next to him, and they get involved in stuff, and he was very intense in that. And I don't know if he was the guy in The Americans or not. I can't recall, but I think the actor does a great job because I feel like he's playing against type as the mayor, right? But as Widow's Bay goes on, have you as since you've seen how he's kind of a bit hesitant with stuff, and I kind of like that. But the Burrows is just it's fun, and the older person element is really interesting because again, I'm not that age yet, but I'm in my 50s. I lived during the 80s. I've been around older people. I've seen people pass in my life and other friends' life. I know people that work in the industry and medical professions. I'm around a lot of doctors, lawyers, nurses. So you just, as you get older, you talk about these things, you deal with them. And so they have some of those things in here for sure. One guy has prostate cancer. Is that necessary to the story? Yes. One guy is an engineer, Alfred Molina's character. Is that necessary? Yes. One of the ladies in there is her past history was she was a journalist back in the day. She was in the counterculture in the 70s in Berkeley or whatever it was like that as an African American woman, Black Power and all that stuff. Is that pertinent to it? Yes, they make it. That works. But the chemistry these actors have is tremendous. I always recommend when people have a natural chemistry, regardless of the quality of the writing or content they're given, they're worth watching. I don't feel like anybody's acting here. That's how good it is to me. I'm very entertained by it too. So, yeah, I put at the beginning of the list there some of the things that had covered, whether I'd watched it or not, my thoughts on it. I'm glad some of you guys have checked some of that out, especially Silo, Widow's Bay. Some of these we may, depending on the feedback, go back and review a little bit later, especially if it's something that piques RDV or Pixel's interest or your guys's, and we can always do another stream for that. So I want to thanks to everybody showing here for tonight. Again, happy birthday to RDV. Well deserved kudos to you, sir, for all the work that you've done here, helping out in the channel, trying some different things out. I appreciate all that. Being a producer is always different than somebody that shows up and talks, or God forbid you're trying to do both, like we both have done over the years, as well as Pixels himself too. So it's a lot of fun. We enjoy what we're doing here, and we enjoy the fact that you guys show up and listen, give us some of your time here as well. You don't have to do that. It's welcomed, and it's welcomed Tuesday night when we go live again for The Man with No Name movie number 2. Check it out. For everybody involved here, I want to say thank you. Good night now.